Okay, everybody, how you all doing? Welcome to the BA Zone's live pre-show. We're going to be going live in about 5 minutes. Thanks everybody for coming. Tonight should be an interesting subject. We're going to be talking about educating the client, specifically around what a business analyst does and the expectations around that. So hope you can stick around for that. It should be a great time, and feel free to comment or jump in with any type of questions. Kathleen will be putting them up live on the board for us. And she's my cohort in the background, doing all the behind the scenes work. So we appreciate that. So hope everybody's week is going pretty good. Not too bad here. Today is 9/11, so that's a bit of a wake-up call. And, our hearts go out to all those folks and first responders. So I can't believe it's been that many years already, but I think it's like 17 years ago already? It's like crazy. But yeah, that was, everyone was all over the TV today. I'm losing my voice a little bit today. But, and we've got that wonderful hurricane heading for, I think it's North or South Carolina. Back to the weather again. I know it's just been a year of amazing weather in this country. So hopefully everybody stays safe down there. And hopefully everybody got water and all the supplies they need to button up and buckle down. And if you're just joining us, feel free to get your coffee, your tea, your martini, put your slippers on, and we're going to get going here in about 3 minutes. We're just checking all the bells and whistles, making sure everything works right here. So I was just up here setting up my system, and I heard this huge crash, and I ran downstairs right away, and somehow Tinker, which is my little Yorkie, somehow got up on top of a glass sort of table that we have behind the couch, knocked over all the picture frames, and then tumbled off. He really can't. Oh, and there's Tinker. Thank you, Kathleen. A little show of Tinker. Of course, Tinker's eyes are almost all white now because he's got very bad cataracts. But we call him Tink the circus dog because he tends to just jump and fall off a thing. I don't think he realizes he can't see anymore. So had to run down there, so maybe just a little bit out of breath before I got up here. But when you have those forever fur babies, you never know what's going to happen in your house, whether you have cats, dogs, hamsters. It's a regular zoo around here sometimes. But he's great. He's a great little guy. And Kathleen's dog is Murphy, of course. And sometimes we hear Murphy in the background. There he is, that cute little guy in his little black tuxedo. We don't get to hear too often from him. Sometimes you'll hear him in the background when traffic or somebody goes by. But every once in a while, you'll hear the dogs barking and grandkids running around, whatever. I'm sure you have the same thing going on in your house, and it's live TV, so you never know what's going to happen. So if you're just joining us, we're just going to get ready. We're going to be talking about educating the client this evening. And if you've ever done any business analysis work, you've dealt with a lot of clients, I'm sure. Some of them are new clients. Some of them are, just startups. Some of them have been around for a while, but oftentimes most of them don't know what we do. And that's a common thing we're trying to educate everybody on, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So feel free to share the link with anybody you think might find this topic interesting. And it is 8 o'clock, and it is go live time. So Kathleen hasn't given me any heads up that anything is wrong. So why don't we get right into tonight's class, tonight's show. So hello, and welcome everybody to all our viewers on Facebook and Periscope and YouTube. We're going to be talking about a bit of a flip theme tonight. We're always talking about educating ourselves as business analysts and learning all about the client and all of their products and services, etc. But we don't always talk about educating the client around what we do. And that's all about what tonight's show is going to be about, is sort of flipping the tables here and talking about how we sometimes, and most of them, it should just be a standard process for everybody, that we go in and we educate the client. And I hesitate to use the word educate because it sounds a little pretentious. It's really, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to remove obstacles and misconceptions or certain expectations that limit our ability to communicate and collaborate with the client. And some of that, we could have called this show the role of BA, misconceptions and expectations, but that's so dramatic, right? And we're trying to really reduce the drama in our lives and in our jobs. But I can venture a guess that if you've been a business analyst for any period of time, and you've worked with a few clients, that you've worked with some that have no idea of what a business analyst does or how they do it, or they have an idea of what we do, but it's all wrong. That old note taker scenario. That's all we do, is we sit and take notes and let everybody else sort of drive the conversation and the innovation. Maybe upper management understands what we do, but then sometimes the people that we have to directly engage with, they've had no exposure in the past to a business analyst or some of the, how we go about our jobs, or they've worked with a poor business analyst in the past, and yeah, they do exist. They are out there. And now they have a perception that all business analysts just stink, right? They just don't know what they're doing. And in general, they're just, not worth the paper that we're on. So that's a big one that we have to change, right? Maybe in the past, they've gone directly to developers or some other knowledge expert that handled this type of work that we do, but maybe not in a systematic or standardized way, right? And they had maybe a limited ability in how they did that. And that's just to name a few scenarios, right? So we're going to talk about some of the things you can do to educate or re-educate or help the client to collaborate with you so that you can actually push them ahead and give them a little success. So before we do that, I just want to take a little break here. And if you know anyone who might benefit from this topic tonight, please feel free to pass us along to them. And if you like what we're doing, please send us some hearts and some likes, and it keeps us motivated, and we really do appreciate it. And excuse me. And we do a lot of this for you, exactly for you, just to keep the community going. So okay, so let's get to some of the steps you can take to educate or collaborate with the client. And always, what we always say, the first thing that you will need to do before you can even get into the subject is put your own house in order by being prepared. You've got to be prepared. If there's already a statement of work in place and you're the BA who's coming on, make sure you read all of that statement of work so you understand it clearly. If it's an industry specific type of project that you're not familiar with, research it, read up on it so you can speak the same language, so you sound like you've worked in this industry before and you can help meet their needs so that they can succeed. And if you can, get invited to any preliminary meetings if you're not already part of a team that's implementing a new process or a project. Try to get on those so people begin to hear your name and associate you as the business analyst. This is just sort of like, oh, I've heard your name on a phone call before. And it's sort of that sense of familiarity that helps when you actually meet with the client or talk with them on the phone, et cetera. And make sure that you have a standard set of answers. It doesn't have to be on paper, but in the back of your mind to some of the questions that clients may have about what you do that you've encountered in the past, or an outline of your approach that you can have handy. And that's always helpful too. So that's just some of the preliminary stuff you can do to foster this type of education. And all throughout tonight's class, I keep saying class. It's sort of like one night I get fixated on a word in tonight's show, I should say. All of these things, what you're doing when I'm giving you these sort of tips, is you're listening for teachable moments, right? So it's not like you're going to the client and saying, "Hey, here's my list. This is what I do. This is what I can do for you." That's not the way you should present it, because that is pretentious, right? So it's sort of like, as people are speaking, you're thinking, aha, that's a little bit of a teachable moment that I can put into my conversation later, because that's really what this is all about, communicating and conversation, right? So there's nothing worse than somebody interrupting you when you're speaking, like every 5 minutes, so that you can give them a teachable moment. Whee, isn't that fun? No, not at all. It should be part of a more subtle way of conversation. As you're talking and you're listening, you're mainly listening to folks. You're picking up on these things that are like, they don't quite understand this. I'm going to put it into my conversation later as a teachable moment. Right? So just keep that in the back of your mind. So as I said, it's part of a subtle conversation. So where does that subtle conversation begin? Well, before we get to that, I just want to take a couple of seconds to, again, thank you for joining the show. And, we get most of our show ideas from you, the audience. So if you have an idea for a show going forward, or if you have any questions or any information that you need, please go to thebazone.com. That's our website. And just drop us a line, and we'll make sure we get that show in front of you. And we do appreciate you guys participating in the game. And again, if you have a specific question, we'll definitely answer that for you. Okay, so where do we work these subtle things into the conversation? Sorry. Again, I always start, if you're brand new to a client or brand new to a project, you want to sort of assess if they understand what a business analyst does, or if they've even ever engaged with a business analyst. So it's sort of like this past experience of good witch or bad witch. Did you have a bad BA or a good BA? So, you can subtly start that conversation by saying, have you ever worked with a business analyst before? Or, and what was that experience like for you? What do you think went wrong? And what do you think, or what did you like about the experience? So this is sort of all about feelings and sort of drawing them out a little bit. And that is in there, that's some teachable moments, right? You're thinking, okay, this was a bad experience for them. Well, what happened? And in your conversation later, you're going to specifically say something of the opposite. This is the way I do this process. This is the way I work. So it's not directly tying them to that experience. You don't want to do that, but you do want to rephrase, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. You want to ask them about the project, right? So this is all about drawing them out, making them feel at ease, let them talk, speak back to them in their own language so that they feel this comfortable type of thing going on. And you're trying to assess whether their goals are realistic, because a lot of people have expectations about what we do that are totally unrealistic. So you just want to try to feel that sort of where they are on that scale. And do they understand how a BA can help them to succeed? How can you help them to succeed? Because that's what it's all about. They hired you because obviously you have expertise, or they hired the company you work for. They have expertise that they do not. Does that mean to say they have they may have business analysts on their side of the wall as well? Maybe they're not good. Maybe they're on other projects. I don't know. There could be a comparison going on, is what I'm saying. So you're just trying to assess all of that. And do they know what they need versus what they want? So you're just having these conversations, and you're looking for these teachable moments, right? So for the bad BA experience, I always like to sort of rephrase it by saying, after a while, the conversation, not right then and there, you don't want to do it, but a little later, you say, well, this is how I work. And this is what's worked for me in the past with other clients. So it's that subtlety. You want to empathize with their experience, right? But you don't want them lamenting about it for too long, because once they get into that mode of lamenting about how bad that BA was, it's hard to get them out to say, hey, how great am I, right? So you're trying to build this trust by focusing on what you can do for them, not so much on the bad that's happened to them in the past. But those are those little teachable moments, right? So this is the way I kind of work. However this person did it, in the back of your mind, keep track and say, well, this works a little bit better. This works for us, and try to find things that will work better for them and insert that into your conversation. And then you're going to want to walk them once you have that upfront sort of conversation, and you've sort of assessed where they're going. And I'm not saying this continually. This is an ongoing process. It doesn't happen boom, 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 one after another. But you want to walk them through your process and be very transparent about what that process is. So tell them how you communicate. What the level, the frequency, and ask them, will that work for you? So you're trying to lead, but you're also trying to get this feedback and incorporate the feedback. And it's a skill set that's putting the client at ease. You're teaching them that this level of communication will work better for you. It'll suit your style versus this level of communication below. So you work out, how do they like to communicate? And you say things like, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Get them involved in how they like to perceive or how they like to get their information. You can say things like, I thought we'd start by working on this particular process first, and explain and outline that process and do it in relatable language. You're not going to want to throw a lot of business analyst technical terms at them if they've never had an experience with a business analyst. So, you're going to want to have maybe a BA checklist handy. And you could actually make that checklist with definitions. Again, you don't have to hand this out, but it's sort of like something that you have in your back pocket to say, okay, this is a process flow, or this is what elicitation is. And we're going to have another show later on that walks through all of the tools and how you explain the things that we do in a relatable language. But you're going to want to outline that particular process in a language that they understand. Like, hey, first of all, I'd like to meet with some users, or I'd like to watch what they're doing. They don't need to know watching what they're doing might be called shadowing, right? We just like to watch your process and watch how people work. We'd like to sit and have a conversation. It's not like, oh, we'd like to have some elicitation meetings or a requirement. It's a very relatable language when people, don't understand the technical terms. And over time, you'll teach them these terms. So you're teaching them, if they ever have another business analyst, what all these things mean. But right off the bat, they never assume that they know what it means, because in a lot of instances, they do not know what it means at all. Okay. So you want to walk them through the steps. You want to focus on certain things like, we're going to go through all the documentation, and we're going to look at discovery and the importance of engagement with people and the importance of decision making and timely decision making. So you're just walking them through, this is how I think it should work. And is there anything you think we should add? And again, you're pulling them in, right? You're getting them engaged. And you're making them feel like they have a little bit of control too, because this can be very disconcerting to people who've never gone through it, right? And again, you're looking for all these teachable moments. And you want to present these teachable moments in multiple ways. It could be with a conversation. It could be with a drawing on the board. It could be with a handout. It could just be, relating it to some type of story, something that's happened to you. We do this all the time in the show. Give you little stories of how this happened and that happened. And those kind of things tend to stay in people's heads and help them to learn. You can also, stress teachable moments with hands-on involvement. So, you can say we're going to get folks involved in, and again, this is a term, joint application design, but designing, the flow, designing how the process works. We're going to get together in a room and just throw out ideas, brainstorming, and that type of thing. Again, in a language that they can relate to. And all of this, by doing all of this, now you're trying to focus. You're always saying we and emphasizing the participation, because when you work for a client, even if you're working for a different company and you're just working on a project for that client, you are now part of that client team. You're not just working for your company. You are literally an advocate for that client that you're working for. And you're in it from beginning to end. And so basically what we're doing here is we're setting up expectations of, we're telling them this is what we do. This is what I can do for you to help you succeed. And these are some of the expectations around that. And initially you're doing that in a very subtle conversation before you start to formalize it with an actual plan, if there's a project plan, et cetera. So we'll just take one little break while I get a little drink of water here. And just to, I just want to remind everybody too that you can sign up for our newsletter if you find this, information helpful to you. You can join our newsletter to find out about upcoming shows or specialties or anything that we're running before anyone else does. And we keep that information private. We promise not to share it with anyone. We, as Kathleen always says, we do believe in karma. So please come and sign up, and we'll get you on the fast track to all the information before anybody else does. Okay, so what else can we do? What else can we do? When we're trying to do these teachable moments, we can try to compare. If it's a new concept for someone, the easiest way to do that is to compare it with a familiar concept. So if you're moving from one application type to another, try to do a comparative thing to say, you were doing this type of thing, and we think that this, which is still familiar to them but slightly different, is a relatable concept. So we try to do that. And then we follow up, as always, with when we're giving these sort of concept ideas and things. Does that make sense to you? How do you feel about that? Should I change something? What do you think? It's always about engagement, education and engagement, education, clarification. Did you get it? Do you understand what I'm talking about? And again, it's not a in-your-face type of thing, very subtle. You can also play devil's advocate. And that always helps. And that gets people to debate with one another. Again, it opens them up. It makes it possible to share and exchange information in a non-threatening sort of way. And that's what it's all about. I mean, you're teaching people things without hitting them over the head or without hitting each other, in a safe place. And all along you've been doing this. You've been setting up expectations, and also don't forget to set up some boundaries. So we get into the area now, we have to start talking about things like, hitting timelines. And when we say we're going to do something, we're not going to then try to add on more and more and more, which is scope creep, obviously. And when we're done defining the requirements for that particular release, they're done. And what signifies that they're done? I mean, these are all kinds of expectations you need to set up ahead of time with the client. They may have preconceived expectations around all of these things. And sometimes we have to knock those expectations down and redefine them I mean, and we're doing that, even as a project goes on, a lot of times we're doing that because of issues that come up, either client issues or hardware, technical, we don't know what could come up. So, right, we're always sort of doing that, resetting expectations for the client, helping them to understand why we're doing that. You never want to get into a position where you're overpromising and under-delivering. You can always say, this is what we can get to. And if you can over-deliver, then it's like you're golden. You're like, wow, you got that done, even though you didn't think you could, type of thing. You thought you were going to release it in phase 4 and you got it done earlier. So, well, you don't want to go that far ahead either, because then that'll make another expectation on their part that you can always do that. But you never want to get in a position where I can do that, and saying yes to the client all the time isn't helpful to them, because it's only going to set you up for failure. So you want to set those expectations by educating them around how long something actually takes. And for a fact, we all know that everyone underestimates how long requirements actually take. We have plenty of, cowboys. You can definitely design something and put it out there and it'll work. Will it work in the long run? Probably not, because people don't think ahead when they do that. As business analysts, we think from, a much higher forest than looking at the trees, type of thing. We have that wider view that we have to look at and make sure it's going to work. A few years from now, it's going to be scalable years from now, or we're just in a cycle of remaking new products all the time and wasting money. So we're dealing with that type of stuff all the time, and educating the client around that is extremely important. So why is all of this important? Learning goes both ways, right? We all learn from each other. It's not a one-sided type of thing. It's all about learning to build this trust and creating an atmosphere of a shared learning and a discovery process, discovering solutions together, discovering new ways to do things. This approach or mindset opens up a channel of communication. And the more you educate customers, the more efficient the process is going to be. Everyone knows what to expect. Everyone understands that if I don't understand something, I can say I don't understand it and somebody will help me. So there's none of that defensiveness. There's none of that friction. It shows that you have professional skills and people skills, right? And you're able to diffuse sensitive situations because you're prepared, because we've set up this level of communication between each other. And and if you're a contractor, they know that you're justifying what you're charging, right? You're justifying what you're charging. They know that you're qualified. They know you're not going to go rogue on them, and you're there to support them. And that's why my price tag is what it is, right? Because I'm good at what I do. And last but not least, when things go belly up, when they go south, when things don't work, and it will happen, it's harder for the client to point the finger and say it's all your fault when they have this feeling that we're all in it together as one team. It's really important. And we're going to get through this hurdle together, and we're going to get over this bump, and we're going to learn from it. We're going to do like a post-mortem, and we're going to check it out. We're going to learn from it. So all of these teachable moments, they're just not a one and done. I said that before, right? You're cultivating this relationship of trust. You're removing the obstacles of misconception and expectations of what a business analyst does. But you're doing it again, weaving it through a subtle, a conversation, a communication between you and your team and the team and the client. And so remember, great communication starts with a conversation that produces this sort of shared learning or understanding. So look for those teachable moments. Okay. And I hope tonight's show was a teachable moment. So it was great having you all here tonight. Let me just double check here with Kathleen, make sure we've got nothing else. No, we're pretty good tonight. Okay, so again, I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight, and we hope you'll all join us next week. And have a great night, everyone, and thanks for stopping by. See you next week. Take care. You still there?